Welcome to our podcast today. Champions are built, and great to be here today. This is Coach Eric Johnson, the brand.
And this is Coach Aaron Thigpen, the source. Guys, we got a special guest today. We've got Greg Tella, president of Sports Social Network. He was a strength and conditioning coach for the Major League Soccer San Jose Earthquakes. He's now coaching for Mustang Soccer in the youth development program from the 5 to 6-year-olds to the 9 and 10-year-olds. Greg was the San Jose Earthquakes strength and conditioning coach for almost 9-10 years. And now he's applying that expertise to the little guys. He also played his college soccer at USD, right down the street from me at San Diego State. A few years after I left, but it's all right. Close to the same era. Welcome.
Don't hold it against you.
So, Greg, just kind of tell us a little bit about your background in soccer and where it's taken you to this point.
Well, thank you guys, by the way, for having me both. I appreciate you having me on here. It's a pleasure and always nice to talk to successful people and, people trying to make a difference in youth athletes. So thanks for having me on. My experience, I grew up here in the Bay Area, grew up in Fremont, California, went to Mission San Jose High School. Played baseball, played soccer, played basketball, did it all as we all did back in those days, right? You played every sport. Around 8th grade, was given the opportunity to step up an age group in soccer, play up a full age, because the coach thought I was good enough to do it, athletic enough really to do it. People thought I was crazy because I was a better baseball player at the time when I switched. And I just went full bore. The guy said I had potential. I said, I'm a natural runner. Not as fast as you, Aaron, obviously, but just natural, baseball was a little slow for me. You had to kind of wait your turn. On a soccer field, I could just go run and get a ball. And it was just kind of built for me. So in 8th grade, basically about 12, 13 years old, just totally dedicated myself to let's go after soccer. Was able to, by the time I was done my senior year, I had won a state title with my club team, won a high school title, was playing for a nationally ranked high school team, and then had the opportunity to get a full ride to go to the University of San Diego. Ended up, and this is where the story really gets good, because this is why I think I went into strength and conditioning. So my senior year, signed my paper, I think on Easter Sunday. In May, ended up blowing out my knee. And so I start, before I even go into my college process, I start the recovery of an injury already. Never been injured before in my life, never had a broken bone, never had anything. And all of a sudden now I'm dealing with a knee issue, right? So I am thrown right into redshirt freshman, get on the rehab train, go through it. Well, by the time I graduated from USD, I had had 5 knee surgeries already. Wow. It just couldn't fix. It was just one of those things. And I happened to be that small percentage where I was unlucky, right? Which is not a big deal, because I ended up, like I just told you guys earlier, I ended up going to a great university and getting a great education at the same time. So it was a win-win for me. Went into life, right? Did my own thing for a while, worked in finance, ran my own company. And then when I was 30, I actually had the opportunity, when the Quakes came back to San Jose in 2009, I was called by a buddy of mine who was the general manager, John Doyle. And he said, hey, there's this new position starting in the league, that the league within 3 years is going to have all the teams. It was mandatory that everybody was going to have a strength and conditioning coach. And so what we wanted you to do, basically, Greg, is we want you to come in, learn strength and conditioning, and combine it with all that soccer knowledge that you have. And then just kind of see and start to work a plan for what is American strength and conditioning inside of soccer. And I was like, okay. So they kind of gave me a runway to learn, to educate myself, to fail a little bit, to be honest with you. And it was great. So back then we played out of Santa Clara University. So my gym was like the outside right field of Santa Clara's baseball field. So it was like TRX straps and med balls. And, I'm sharing the gym possibly sometimes with like the women's basketball team or the women's volleyball team. And, it was crazy. So you had to be very adaptive, right, at it. And then, within probably 4 years, everybody in the league had a strength and conditioning coach. And then it became also, I would say, a data grab, right? And you guys have seen this. Data became a big part of the game. So you needed to also become like a sports scientist at the same time. So as I kind of expanded or continued to to grow myself there, I also continued to become a sports scientist basically for the club. And I have to say that I'm not the only one. We worked as a team, and that was our philosophy there. Our idea was we really wanted to build a performance lab like they have at AC Milan in Italy. Whereas, and you guys know this from working in the pros and being around professionals, when coaching staffs leave, usually everybody leaves with them, from all the way from the head coach all the way down to like the equipment guy, right?
Yeah.
And what we were trying to create in San Jose was this idea of, hey, we have this kind of performance lab where we have all these brains and minds that can really help our athletes. We don't care what the coach or who the coach is. You can play a 4-3-3, you can play a 4-4-2, you can play a pressure, low press, whatever you want. We're just here to help you. So again, we were trying to create that kind of atmosphere of, hey, we don't really want to change. Like, we don't want to move to Cincinnati. We don't want to go to Florida.
Right.
You know, we don't want to uproot ourselves, right? We want to kind of, especially the performance guys, we wanted to stay. We had families forming. So we were like, can't we stay around long enough, right? And I mean, we got lucky. I worked for 7 different head coaches while I was at San Jose. So that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Not many people can even say that in professional sports. So, you know, again, we got kind of lucky. We had a great staff, guys like Brian Lee, Bob Alejo. I mean, there were some guys that have come in and mentored me that were just, you know, just unbelievable. When you're at the pro level, you have access to budgets sometimes that other people don't. So you get to kind of experiment and try things out, you know, where other people may not. You know, like we flew consultants in from Australia for a weekend, which most guys wouldn't be able to do that. But we wanted to learn about player load and making sure that we were making good decisions and not chasing ghosts and these types of things. And we'll get into that stuff later. But, you know, it was this game has blessed me. Let's just put it that way. It's blessed me. And along that way, while I was doing all this, you know, I've always had it in the back of my mind that my job was to give back. So along the way, I've always coached. So whether I coached the high school kids when I first started with the Quakes, or now when I don't work with the Quakes anymore and have been retired there, now it's just with the youth kids. And Aaron and I spoke about this on a previous call, EJ. You know, one of the things that you kind of find in your life too, as you get older and you have family and you're trying to balance time and money and all these things that come up is, have I found my lane, or do I get my like oomph out of what I'm doing, right? And you know, it took me about a year to adjust to the youngsters. Just in like, you know, I call it herding cats, right? It's a different mentality. You got to have a different approach to them.
Yeah.
But once you kind of figure those little dudes out, they are awesome, man. And like, they are so much fun to be around. And for me, and you guys, again, I'm speaking to the choir here, but when you guys work with professional athletes, you spend hours and hours and hours getting these little fractional returns because that's what's needed at their level. Well, when you work with a youth kid, you spend maybe 10% of the time that you do with a pro athlete, and you get these like hockey stick like returns with them. And you know, for me, when you start having family and kids and stuff, you start to balance like, okay, if I'm going to spend my time on a field, I want to make sure I'm getting that bang for my buck. Right. And these little kids were just, you know, the enthusiasm that they come with, the excitement, you know, they're just jazzed to be there. They're not dragging all this, you know, crap along with them, excuse my language, you know, as they do when they get older. So it's just, and one of the biggest jobs we have there is creating excitement around the sport. And just, you know, I tell the parents, my job is to have your kids sitting in the car screaming at you going, I don't want to be late. Let's go. We're running. Come on. So that's really my job. And listen, I've had a blast doing it. I love it. You know, we're incorporating a lot of skipping right now, Aaron. So you know what that's like, right? Just trying to find the rhythm and stuff. So, you know, a lot of stuff about this is fun. And you know, one of the things that we started to look at now on the youth level is how we can start to incorporate movement, right? Like how we start to get these 5, 6, and 7-year-olds to start to understand their body. And again, not just going, hey, just go run, but like, okay, hey, can you skip? Can you jump? You know, and all this type of, can you throw? Can you catch? So, you know, this is the stuff we're all looking at. And every year at Mustang, I sit down with my buddy, Johnny, and we reevaluate the year. And we go through what worked, what didn't work. And we try to just make little incremental changes. So hopefully make us better. And that's the goal. And we've been doing that now for 4 years. We think we've got a good program so far, but we think we can always improve. I mean, there's, you know, if you've stopped trying to challenge yourself and improve, then you might as well sit out on the couch and give up, right? So the idea is to always get better. So that's a little bit about me. Love the game. The game's blessed me. That's all I have to say. I mean, it's been great. It's been great. I've been grateful to be a part of the whole thing. So it's been a blast.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
you kind of anticipated my first question. We kind of had that. We had a whole, like you said, what was going to be a 5-minute conversation, but about a month ago that turned into an hour conversation. So we're just trying to bring that now to the podcast. But I want to stay in this lane of youth development. And since you've seen the spectrum now, basically from little guys just starting out to the pros, like I see Wondolowski's jersey behind you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So you've seen what it takes, that whole spectrum. And it sounds like you guys are starting to address some of the things that we talked about. Just basic rudimentary motor skills, not even about kicking the ball, dribbling, and those sorts of things. But hey, how do we give these kids the right start? And you talked about the skipping and everything. Can you speak a little bit more about what you're seeing? And also, I think what is key is the parents' expectations and perceptions of what they think their kids should be doing at this point, because I think that's where the big disconnect is.
Oh yeah, and me and you, I think you could, like you said, we could probably have multiple podcasts on this too. But you know, one of the things that I brought up to you when we talked briefly too was, you know, one of the things that's just really stuck out to me is just the increase in youth injuries that we've seen in the last, let's just call it 5 years, right? Like since I've been really paying attention to it. And, you know, going back just a little bit, you know, part of the process at the Quakes was when we built our academy, our youth system, right? You know, my job was to hire a strength coach to oversee all those young guys and to build this athleticism that you're talking about, Aaron, right? And so you start to see just different levels of like what is required, right? And listen, I go back to, you know, when we're working with pros, we're working for fractional 0.1 of a second, half a percent improvement, because in that world, that's what they need. With young guys, for me, the hardest part is just these guys are like not learning how to move anymore. And again, I'm not trying to be like and listen, I'm a soccer guy, right? But I will tell you, we are asking kids to specialize way too early in our sport, just in soccer ourselves. Now, I know everybody else is doing it too, but we're asking for it. And we're saying the reason is because we need to get all these touches on the ball and hours on the field. I mean, you guys have heard the 10,000 hours, 10,000 reps and all this stuff. And for me, what I'm wondering, and again, I haven't done enough research to be like, oh, you can point to this study or that study. But all I can show you is that, you know, in the last, like, let's just say the last year, I think we've had 4 girls ACLs and like under 15 years of age. I mean, how does that happen nowadays, right? And again, it's not that woman's fault or that girl's fault or their family's fault or our club's fault or anything like this. There's something wrong with what's going on. And I've pointed, and again, like, these are just kind of like shots in the dark, but you look at it, we're taking PE out of schools. Right. So my kid now, when I used to go to school, we almost it was PE every day. At minimum, it was 3 days a week. And I think the old curriculum was, and Aaron, you probably can correct me on this, is you did like 5 to 6 weeks of a sport and then you switched. And then you did 5 to 6 weeks and you switched. So like basically every single year I was a kid until high school, which is where you kind of get to choose if you don't participate. I had to play almost every sport on the spectrum. Whether I was good at it, bad at it, hated it, liked it, whatever, I had to play it. Or guess what? My teacher gave me a C or an F, right? So we were kind of making kids participate and be athletic, or at least build athleticism. Think about all the calisthenics we used to do in PE, right? To like get ourselves ready. And the other thing that Aaron and I even laughed about was, and it's probably the stupidest thing ever, but hey, you remember Coach, the old lazy coach? Hey guys, run a mile. Just go run a mile. That's how you warm up. Well, guess what? In that mile, you're learning how to run, whether it's the right way or the wrong way. Nobody's telling you like, hey, got to kick your knees up higher, or hey, you know, get that heel kick better or better arm swings. No, you're like a horse getting thrown out into the field, just going, hey, figure out how to run and like release yourself, right? And so you look at these things nowadays, and we're not getting any experiences like this. And listen, my son, we live here in Livermore. We go to Sunset Elementary School. It's a great elementary school, but the teacher is required to give the students the PE curriculum, not a PE teacher, not somebody, but a teacher that's got math and English and history to worry about is now going to throw PE on top of it, right? So you go into that, and then you were asking 10-year-olds, hey, don't you can't play baseball. You have to just play soccer, or you can't play lacrosse, or you can't play basketball. And then, I look at this and I'm like, okay, well, if I want to cross-train soccer and I wanted a pro athlete to be like, hey, get away from soccer for a while, what could you do? Well, tennis is a good sport to cross-train in. Why not use tennis? Lateral movement, things like that, attacking, quick bursts of movement. Oh, well, yeah, and it doesn't require you to kick a soccer ball. Well, people might think I'm crazy, but there's so much that goes into tennis. Lateral movement, forward and back pedal, rotation, right? And I take all that and I'm like, okay, rotation for shooting, for kicking, forward and back pedaling, right? That's what we do in soccer. 97% of it's running around the field without the ball. Even baseball, tracking a fly ball in the outfield for baseball helps the center back track a goal kick to head it. It's the same exact function. It's just one's using a mitt to catch the ball, the other one's using their head. So for me, I always thought that I was a great athlete or a well-rounded athlete that ended up picking soccer because I had this well-built base and I could just go, okay, and who knows? Could I have picked a baseball and been as good? I don't know. Basketball, I doubt it. I'm only 6 foot tall. So I don't know, but I feel like we're getting away from building what I call healthy athletes who then kind of can excel in sport to building what I call a specialized athlete that if you took him off the soccer field and put him anywhere else, he'd probably break. Or a basketball guy onto something else, he would probably break. And for me, I just feel like, there's a bad things heading into the society that we're already we're overweight, obese. We're dealing with a lack of health and fitness in our society anyways. And now we're taking all this stuff away. And the other thing, Aaron and EJ, if you really think about this, it's almost like the fun's getting snatched out of the game.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah.
And EJ, I think you're a baseball guy, so you might be able to speak a little bit. So, my son's right now in AAA over here at GLL, right?
Okay.
And, I'm like, okay, he'll play next year as a 12-year-old in the majors, which will be great. Then he has one shot to play in that 50-70 league, right? Which is intermediates.
Right.
And then what's crazy about that is I grew up in a place where when you got to senior ball, which was 13 to 15, we had 8 teams playing.
Right.
We're going to maybe have 2 teams at our local little league. And that means they're going to have to travel around, which is fine to play. But I was sitting there going, holy smokes, just people don't even play the game for fun anymore. It's almost like they're getting forced out because, hey, you're not the alpha. So you're because you don't fit the alpha kind of funnel. We're not even going to waste our time developing you or teaching you the sport or good, healthy habits, all those things that come along with it. And I'm just like, and Aaron, we joked about this, about the waiting game, right? For me, my son's kind of one of those guys that's not the alpha yet. But I mean, if you look at his genetics, he'll probably get there eventually.
Right.
So I've just got to buy time with my boy, right? and so it's just well, but when is that going to happen? And I don't know when that timeline is going to happen for him, and nobody knows. But if all of a sudden my son can't play baseball at 13 anymore just because he's not in that alpha guy, well, then how do I even know if my son's going to be good at baseball? You know what I mean? I almost feel like I'm taking a pawn out of the baseball world and saying, you don't even get to see if this guy can make it through. And I'm just picking baseball here, but it's almost like we're doing that. And you guys know plenty of people who have developed later in high school and through college that became pro athletes and very successful people. And they weren't that guy. And Aaron, how many guys were the alphas before you? You know what I mean? And honestly, where are most of those guys at 18 or 20? Probably not anywhere to be found.
Thank you. No, you're absolutely right. You're preaching to the choir. We've had this conversation, and just to backpedal a little bit, you described what we call there's a lack of repertoire movement being built within these athletes, and we got it through play, and we got it through recreation, which would be our PE, those sorts of things, rec leagues. Because there wasn't a lot of competitive leagues. There wasn't a lot of competitive leagues growing up. And you're right, that's hurting athletes now. And then to move to your point about the late bloomer, yeah, I always take late bloomers because I know that story. And it's funny, even in college, most of the guys that I ran with who were successful in college were all late bloomers, not on the radar in high school,
Right.
not state finalists, this, that, just I understand the development curve.
Yeah.
And one of the most frequent questions and conversations I have, and I had this conversation yesterday, parent calls, says, yeah, my kid's 12 years old and he can't run and he's uncoordinated, but God, just 2 years ago, he was one of the fastest kids on the team. And I have to explain to him, hey, well, now the kid's probably 6 inches taller, two shoe sizes bigger, and now he's starting to get into puberty, and he's got delayed muscle onset, soreness, and lactic acid buildup, and all
the
these
things we deal with old people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people just don't understand that. And so, great early doesn't mean great late.
Yep.
Right.
And I try and warn these parents, and I told him, I said, look, your kid could be great up until he's at a certain age. And there could be a kid who comes out on that field on cutoff shorts and high tops and takes your kid's lunch and has never played the game before.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's just sports. That's how it happens.
Yep.
And so I think there's no way to insulate yourself from that, but just from a holistic and healthy overall development and appreciation for sport and movement, you have to have athletes do a variety of things. And EJ's talked about it before. EJ was a major league infielder, but EJ also played tennis for fun.
Yep.
And it's a great crossover.
Yep.
So, and it's not about being successful at all of these sports. And I think that's one of the pressures that the athletes have too, is they feel if I can't be successful at this sport, then I don't want to do it. And we're just talking about recreation. Who cares what the end result is? Just get out there and move and experience it. And that sport that isn't your main sport, but you play recreationally, probably will be the sport that you pick up once you retire from your sport. And
so
you'll
funny you said
enjoy
it. Yep. Because it's something you enjoy, right? It's like you enjoy doing it. And see, and you bring up a good point. Okay. So EJ, let me ask you a question, kind of expanding on what Aaron just said there. I've talked to a few people, and they've said that when they're going to kind of look at pitchers to kind of draft for the pros now, they're really not looking at guys that were pitchers that grew up as pitchers because they're worried about their arms basically lasting. What is your take on that? Or am I hearing rumors and that's all it is rumors, or is that real stuff you're hearing?
Real stuff. Gee, it really is. I'll tell you this. The biggest thing that we're seeing in our industry is overuse injuries. Now, you're seeing that in all sports. People are specializing too early, whether it's, repetitive motion. And repetitive motion is huge in baseball, especially in pitching. Because that arm is being exposed when you get on a slant. You're on a mound. You're not on flat ground. You're on a mound, and it's a very violent action. And when pitchers are throwing, these guys are throwing 90 miles per hour. I got kids at 14, 15 throwing 87, 90 miles per hour. And then they go out and play travel ball, and they go in these big tournaments. They're being used, and they're being overused. And all of a sudden, when they go in for a physical. So before the draft, right? And there's people you're interested in. People like to have physicals on these players. They go in and they start to see something that doesn't look right. And usually is an overuse issue. So you get a player that's been playing third base, maybe not a great hitter, but he's got a great arm. They go, I'm going to draft that guy, but I'm going to make him a pitcher now. Or he's in college and he didn't hit really good, but he's a catcher. I'm going to make him a pitcher because there's only so many, I'm going to say, bullets you have in that arm. Once you have, I will say this, if you have rotator cuff surgery, very, very difficult to come back and be a major league pitcher again. Very difficult. You lose your velocity. But if you have Tommy John, which is more of elbow injury, you're going to have one blowout and then come back again, probably for the second time, but the third time you're done. So what kids are having, I'm starting to see this, and you said this earlier, kids are having these injuries at 14 and 15 that we never thought about. You were talking about ACLs. I'm starting to see kids having surgery, Tommy John wraps at 13, 14, and kids aren't even playing anymore. They're not playing the sport anymore. Forget about pitching. They don't want to play anymore. Specialization in youth sports, to me, if you're out there listening, is bad, parents. I think we need to go ahead and I'm on my pedestal now talking. Kids need to play a lot of sports. There's time and place when they can specialize and be a professional or be that elite athlete. You know, the sport's going to let you know that. Playing a lot of sports is not going to kill you. Let your kids develop. Let them develop other muscle groups that can help them sustain, you know, some sort of healthy body. And you know that. Aaron and you are professionals at these bodies. You guys understand that and know that. So I'm glad that both of you are talking about this today, because parents need to be educated. I think that's the biggest problem in our industry in youth sports. Parents aren't educated on what is wrong, what is right, what they should do, who they should seek out advice to. That needs to all change. I think we can help a lot of parents out there who have a lot of questions. So parents out there, I hope you're being educated with these two gentlemen here. I think it's important to understand that if you have advice, you have questions, seek out professional advice with youth kids, because I think we're specializing in sports too early and kids are getting injured too early. And, you know, what do you guys have to say about that? Because I think specialization is hurting youth sports today.
No, I agree.
And you want me to take a swing at it real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Everyone's heard my take on this.
No, I don't disagree. I mean, this is my thing that it's, I mean, this is probably doesn't land well with people when it's said, but remember, 1% of the population in athletics makes it to professional sports, guys. So the reality is our kids that we're talking about are probably not going to be pro athletes. Okay. Now, that being said, do you ever give up on somebody? No. You push them and you run it out as hard and you exhaust your chance, right? That's what you do. That's the idea. But what I say is you got to use these things as tools, right? And for me, I talk to my soccer guys, my older guys, when I get chances to work with them, is this is a tool to get into a great college, to get a great education. And if you end up playing pro soccer, dude, that's champagne and cherries on top of the cake, right? I mean, that's ideal. But in reality, the reason why we all play sport, I think we forgot this, is for exercise and health reasons. And finding a passion, like Aaron said, where, hey, EJ plays tennis now, right? He's retired. He plays tennis now. That's the thing he does, right? Well, why? Well, he had a passion for the game. Never played it professionally, always played it for fun, but now he plays tennis in his pastime, right? Well, that keeps him healthy. Obviously, he's a coach too, works in baseball, all this other stuff, right? But I think that's what we're forgetting, is a lot of this stuff is to keep your kids mentally healthy while they're in school, right? Keep them off drugs, hopefully keep them from being pregnant or knocking up somebody and all this type of stuff, and staying healthy. Why? Well, if you go back to academics, you are smarter when you're physically fitter and your brain functions better and all this type of stuff. So again, the baseline is we're trying to create healthy choices for people. And I think sports is a way to do that. It's a tool. Can it get you to be a professional athlete? If you're lucky, yes. Can it get you into college? Yes. And a great degree and a great education and a lot of fun. But guess what? It teaches you all these things that you can take as an adult and continue to use. You can go on a run. You can go play tennis. You can gather your buddies up and play home run ball when you're 30. I mean, there's still things you can do. I mean, you know, I go out when we have family stuff and my son's out shooting hoops in the front. I mean, we go out and goof around and play horse still. And, you know, I'm in my mid 40s, you know, my brother's 40. So, and we still, you know, we enjoy it and we'll stay out there for hours doing it. And that, I think, is where we're missing. Now, when you go back to all this stuff, is, do you need to spend the times on the trainer? Sure. If you got the means to do that and you want to help your kid out, yes. But then you always have to take into account how much extra work is being done. What's the exertion rate by your son? Is he recovering? I mean, there's so much, Aaron, we could spend hours talking about this, but I think it's a bigger holistic approach than just play multiple sports. You've got to eat right. You've got to recover correctly. You've got to hydrate. You've got to sleep right. I mean, you've got to deal with your mental stress. I mean, there's so much. It's not just, hey, I need to get a little faster, so I just got to see a guy like Aaron who's going to teach me how to run faster. No, there's more to it. Are you sleeping right? Are you getting the right micronutrients? All this type of stuff. And listen, I'm not a nutrition guy. I always hired a really smart nutrition guy for the Quakes because it was never really my MO. But what we put in our bodies is obviously vital, guys. And managing, and again, it's this just big holistic kind of thing that you have to deal with. And it takes work. I mean, and it takes some discipline. It really does. I don't want to I want to make sure people don't think it's like a bad thing. I mean, go for it, but understand that it's just like anything else. You got to work at it to be good at it. Right. So that's kind of, I'm right there with you. I just think it's a more holistic approach. We got to play more sports. We got to stop specializing early. We got to make sure we're covering all the bases of food, sleep, hydration, you name it. Are we moving correctly? All these types of things, right? I mean, one of the things that I laughed about, I told Aaron last time, people ask me, well, what would you recommend? And I always say, just have your kid join the track team and learn how to run. Don't put a ball at his foot to run. Don't put a ball in his hand to run. Don't have him try to dribble a basketball while he's running. Just let the kid go learn how to run. And most people that know how to run can move and do other things. So that's kind of it. Aaron, you got anything to add to that? I mean, obviously, I know you've said this over and over and pounded the table about it, but.
No, I agree with everything you said. Actually, I want to switch gears. Again, I don't want to hold you too long. I have a question here, and it's something that kind of was piqued by a conversation me and EJ had yesterday.
Okay.
And I think it's indicative of the environment that we put our kids in. And that's where I'm seeing and he's seeing there's more and more kids who have a problem bridging the gap between practice and performance.
Oh, yep.
And I think, I'm not sure if there's one answer to it, but I think this whole infrastructure we've built for youth sports now that's a business doesn't address that. It addresses all of the X's and O's, the conditioning and the running and all this stuff. But these kids have a hard time transferring all of these things, excuse me, that they're spending good time and money for into performance.
Oh yeah.
And
that's so funny that you say this because no, we literally, this is one of this last kind of, so a lot of what we do when the younger kids is we try to bring the physical aspect of it. Like what can they actually grasp physically? Well, then you go, wow, what can they actually grasp mentally, which is really what you're getting at, right? And so when you really start to pull back that curtain, right, you're talking, and especially with me, I'm talking 5 to 9-year-olds, right? What can they really absorb? And so what we've tried to do, Aaron, is we've tried to kind of break this down now. And again, I'm not sure if this is the right model, but this is what we're trying to work on now at Mustang, is at the young ages now that I have, for instance, a 77 age group, let's call it 5 to 9-year-olds, we're using the term teaching them how to train. We're trying to teach them how to train first, meaning like, can they show up to practice and stay focused for an hour and a half and not like, where's the butterflies? And like, oh, look, there's Timmy. I know. Like, can we stay focused? Can we like accomplish the task that we're out here to do? And then in like, say 9 through, I think 12 in that, what we call our 99 stage, we are using the term learn how to compete. So you take all this work, you're learning how to train at a high level, stay focused. Now, all that training has to step onto a game field on Saturday and Sunday and has to like translate, right? So that learning how to compete part. So we're kind of trying to do it in 2 phases. And again, I'm not sure if that's the right way to do it, but that's kind of how we're approaching it. And again, we're taking it from a mental capacity standpoint is we're already putting so much on these young kids, right? How much can they actually take in? So my little guys, hey, I just need you out here. we're focusing every time on, can we train for an hour and a half with the lack of distraction? And if we get that done, we're winning. Then as they get a little bit more mature and mentally capable, now you're learning how to come out here 2 to 3 times a week, stay focused for that hour and a half. Now we were using a term now at Mustang when we bring our teams together before we even start warming up for a game day, we say game time. It's just like everybody come in. Hey, today's Saturday, today's Sunday, it's game time. Now, when we turn around and start our warm-ups, it's all business from here on in. So we're trying to kind of ingrain this. Now, we're not doing that at practice. You know, we'll bring them in and say, okay, remember, guys, right now at training, we're focused on trying to stay focused, trying to stay attentive throughout the, be coachable throughout the training session. But then now we're pushing that, okay, Saturday is game time. Now it's time to kind of increase the intensity, increase the mental sharpness, and like turn that light switch on. Now, is it working? Who knows, right? It's a process, that'll take time. But that is very interesting that you bring that up, because we haven't actually said it that way. We've just been talking about it with like, okay, hey, with these younger guys, mental capacity, what can they take on? Okay, well, if we can teach them how to train right, then we think we're winning for the coach. Then at the next stage, which is learn how to compete, because after that stage is basically 8th grade through high school, pretty much, right? Mm-hmm. Now that's when what I call the rubber meets the road, and you got to show up. If you're going to do it, that's the place to do it, right? So that's what we're trying to learn how to do. And then, and then you start adding the bells and whistles as you get older, right? As the tactics and the X and O's, the psychology sometimes around it too, and all that type of stuff. So we're working at it. And again, it's like, it's almost like try something. Ooh, that didn't work so well. Okay, how can we rearrange it? So we'll see. This is kind of what we've been working on all year. My little guys, my 7-year-olds right now, the whole entire year so far is about learning how to train, how to train. And and we're emphasizing it. We kind of change some of our language for them throughout the year. So the transition shifts, and that's what we're working on. Common language throughout our club. Common ideas of like, how the progression goes, and those types of things. So those are things we're considering. But no, you're right. I mean, there are kids, when you put them on a game field on Saturday and Sunday, you can just see that they are mentally not ready for it. It's almost like stress and anxiety. And I don't know, except for, I'm like the old school guy. Just, you got to throw them in the deep end. They'll figure out how to, swim eventually. Now, obviously, modern day people and psychologists will probably tell you there's better ways to do that. Right. And there probably are. But sometimes, just being stuck in situations kind of make you work your way out of it. Right. I mean, your car breaks down or your tire pops. You never change the tire. Well, you look on YouTube and you figure it out. So, that's what you do. But yeah, no, I mean, that I don't disagree with what you're saying. It's not translating as well, but I also don't know if we're emphasizing the idea of that. Does that make sense? Because are we asking kids to compete too much everywhere then, or whatever, right? Or is it not enough type thing? It's those types of things. Yeah.
I think competing is this kind of abstract term. First, we're in a society where the pendulum has shifted and said, well, competing is bad.
Right.
So now these kids are kind of like, well, because we haven't really defined the arenas where competition is appropriate, I think these kids might be a little confused as to, hey, what's nice, what's not nice, that sort of thing. Because you and I both know, if you're going to be good at sports, when you're out on the field, you got to have a little asshole in you.
Yeah, I call it piss and vinegar. Yep, that's exactly what it is.
And so that you balance that with the be nice and unicorns and rainbows and all the stuff that these kids are getting in elementary. The kids probably wondering like, what do I do?
They are.
And I think what organizations and coaches, and this was just something that kind of popped in my head as you're talking, is, you know what, we've got to develop competitive habits. Somehow figure out a way to instill competitiveness in athletes so that they know when it's appropriate, what intensity, when to turn it off, what competitiveness looks like. Because I have a feeling a lot of kids don't know what it looks like. And maybe build some kind of structure that way. Again, I don't know what that looks like, and maybe it's different for every kid and organization in sports, but I think we need to start to reinforce when they're showing good competitive habits and pointing that out and reinforcing that. And then when they're not, reinforcing saying, hey, look, no, that's not how we compete. And again,
well, it's funny you bring this up. And EJ, you can tell me a little bit from your experience in baseball too. But like, if you ever step around any pro organization and you walk around those athletes, if your games and your practices are not competitive, you lose those athletes in a split second at a pro level, because all those guys, like, I've seen a couple fist fights break out at practice just because the team lost at the end of the day, like 21 points to 20, you know what I mean? And like not having it. So you're right. Competitiveness at the highest level. I mean, they fight over cards, right? You beat a guy in cards and blackjack on the plane ride. You know, you and him are getting into it in the hotel afterwards. That's how competitive. And I think people need to realize that, like, competitive, there's places for it and there's times to operate in it. Now, do you have to live competitively on a Monday morning batting cage session? Probably not, right? But you do have to instill, like, maybe the guy in the cage swinging at that moment should be dialed in and focused on, hey, you're competitive as all can be right now, right? Because listen, I think that's one of the other things between you and I, the mental kind of capacity of this is that, and listen, again, not trying to be rude or mean to anybody, but we live in a much softer world than we did 30 years ago. I think things that affect kids nowadays, like, we would just brush off like waters off a duck, feathers type thing. And, because I've literally watched a kid be so emotional before a game start that he couldn't even step onto a field. And the game, he didn't make a mistake. He didn't even make a bad pass. The game hadn't even started, and he couldn't physically get himself, like, so I don't know, maybe, and this goes back to the specialization and all the stress maybe we're putting on kids too as parents. Right. I mean, like, this may be like a full circle kind of gambit thing, like, or is it too competitive or stressful? And that's not coming from the coach. That may be coming from the household. And again, parents, I'm not trying to be that guy or that mean, but, everybody, he's got everyone take a deep breath and remember, 1% of that athletic population makes the pros. So just be happy that your kid's out there enjoying himself, having fun, whatever sport that he plays, enjoy it, enjoy the time with it. You know what I mean? Because it goes by quick, and then you're not going to be able to see him do it. You're lucky if you can see your grandkids do it, right? I mean, time flies so quick. So yeah, no, I don't disagree. That's super interesting though, about the competitive part, that we probably do need to think about how we're incorporating competitive games into training maybe. And that, so you can turn that. Can we see if the kids are getting that light switch? And I don't know, what do you see in a baseball locker room around competitiveness?
Well, I'll tell you this, what we've done in our club, EJ Sport, that we make practice, not only training, but we make it competitive. We actually pair off guys and have them compete. It doesn't mean every second of practice, but there needs to be an element of teaching how to compete. I call it competitive spirit, and teaching them how to do it in practice. It's like we want practice to be like a game, but it's on stage. So when they go to the game situation, they understand, and it's like you said, it's game time.
Yeah.
So if you do a little bit at practice, it helps them a little bit, and it relieves a little pressure for them. I also say this. I look at a lot of athletes in today's society. They sure are smiling when they're competing. And I see a lot of kids not smiling when they're out there competing. They have to have fun. Sport's meant to be fun. And if you're not competing and having fun and smiling and all that, it's a plethora of emotions. And that's what sport is. And that's part of the process.
Well said, EJ. I like that, actually. And you hit a word on the nose there that a lot of people forget is fun. This should all be fun. And guys, if it's not, then find the sport that is fun, because ask all these guys, when you have to grind when you're 22 and you don't like the sport, it's going to be real easy to walk out of the gym at 5 a.m. and not go. So you got to make sure you love these things, guys. Trust me. It pays off, especially in the long term, because these guys all know what it's like to grind and grind and grind. And you got to have a passion for the game. And if you don't, that grind is easily gone.
That's true.
So, yeah.
Well, hey, we'll leave it there. I know we've gone over our time here, but like I said, you see how Tom Greg, we just go. So
Right.
that means we've got unfinished business with you, dude, and we gotta have you back.
Hey, no, I'd love to. Love to. Sorry, my low power just. No, boys. It was a pleasure. Again, this is awesome. Hey, and you're right. We probably could spend a couple more podcasts expanding on some more points here. So, Aaron, if you want me back, just give me a shout, man. I'd love to come back and join you and EJ. All right.
Oh yeah, we definitely will, because I know we've got a lot more to talk about. Definitely have a couple more questions I wanted to go over, and I think the people need to hear from you. Not because you're kind of coming from the same church that I am, but I think it's good to hear different voices from different arenas, and even if we can have different experiences, but also have shared experiences. And there's some commonalities in that. That's one reason why we do Champions Are Built, is to point out that there's no secret formula to success, but there are some commonalities and some traits that if you don't have them, you're not likely going to get to where you want to be if you want to be a champion. So it's always good to have, those people who agree with us as well as those people who disagree. So appreciate you, bro.
Well, boys, I appreciate you, and I thank you so much. And listen, I look forward to the next time you have me on, sir.
Perfect. Take us out.
Hey, well, great having you today, Greg. And people, thanks again for listening to us at Champions Are Built. And this is Coach EJ, the brand.
This is Coach Aaron, the source. We'll see you.